ever say, do you like the title? Have we got the title slide up yet? You haven't got a title slide yet? We're close. How can I swim with my foot in my mouth? That's the title. See, when Lex is away, we can get up to all sorts of mischief. It's great. In fact, this will probably be on the podcast. You'll hear me say that. That won't be any good. Have you ever said the wrong thing and wish you could take it back? I think we've all done that, haven't we? Like you want to be able to reach out, grab that word and pull it back in. I was what's known as the Chief of Staff down at our Officer Training Academy down in Canberra at Duntroon. And I had a bunch of responsibilities, but one of the responsibilities I had was to run all the ceremonial and parade events that were there. I had staff, of course, that did the detail, but my name went on all the authorities and that sort of stuff. Anyway, I got this phone call one day, and the phone rang, and I picked it up, and the voice said, "Hello, Mick, this is the Governor-General." And we had at the time been having this sort of playing practical jokes on each other in the office, and so after all, as if the Governor-General is going to know who I am, right? So clearly this is a stitch-up. So I told him that not only was that not the Governor-General, but it was the worst impersonation of the Governor-General that there ever was. Anyway, there's a bit of a silence on the end of the phone, and then he said, actually, it's General Jeffrey, it is the Governor-General. And I felt about this small when I realised that it was the Governor-General. He'd actually rung me on the phone. And I mean, what's the chance of that happening? And there was a reason for it. I'm sure he wouldn't normally ring people where I was, but he'd got the parade brief. He was coming to do a parade, and my name, of course, was on the brief. And his son and I had been to the academy together, and his son was getting married, and he just mentioned that, he was going to Duntroon, and his son knew that I was there, and he said, pass his regards on to me. And anyway, so the perfect storm ends up. The Governor-General probably never rings anybody, right? I mean, he has staff to do that. He rings me, and of course, I blow him off and tell him he's an impersonator. And I was just, if I could have died and gone to heaven, I would have been a happy man at that point. He actually thought it was pretty hilarious. And in fact, I understand that for several months after that sort of episode was what he would start dinner addresses with. He'd sort of talk about this guy that, didn't believe that he was the Governor-General and sort of blew him off. Well, I was just cringing in my office, as you can imagine. And, there's those moments, isn't it, where you just wish you could just reach back down the phone or reach out and grab those words and just take them back. Because in hindsight, you look like a bit of a dill. Well, the Bible tells us of a man who is pretty much one of those guys. And he's the sort of guy that probably, at this particular point in time we're going to have a look at him, he's wishing he could get some words back. Because he's made some promises, he's done some stuff, and he said he's going to do some things, and in hindsight, he doesn't deliver at all. And his name was Simon. Now, we know him, of course, by probably his nickname, which was Peter. And so he was known as Simon Peter, but Peter was really his nickname, and it meant the rock. And so that's really what we know of him. And we're going to have a look and see what he said. This was the bold claim that he made. It came out of Mark 14, and it's from starting in chapter 27. And it says this, on the way, Jesus told them, that's all the disciples, all of you will desert, for the scriptures say, God will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there. Peter said to him, even if everyone else deserts you, I never will. Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, Peter, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. No, Peter declared emphatically, even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you. And all the others vowed the same. So Peter had made this pretty bold promise the very night that Jesus was taken away, he was tried, and of course the next day he was crucified. He was bragging in many ways. Even if everyone else drops off, I'm going to be with you, is what he says. Now, of course, we all know how this story ends. It ends with that very night. Not only does Peter not die with him, but he denies him. He denies he even knows him. And he just doesn't do it once, but he does it 3 times, of course. He denies he even knows him, and he ends up running away. He bolts. So in this, now we're going to take it on. It's a week later. It's a week after Jesus was raised from the dead. We've heard this bold claim that Peter's made. The apostles have seen the resurrected Jesus now twice. And so we're going a little bit ahead now. They've seen him twice. It's the end of the Passover, and they've gone to Galilee, which is where they all came from originally. So they're all heading off to Galilee. Well, not all of them, but most of them. And they're expecting to meet him again. Remember what he said in Mark 14. He said, "I will rise to the dead. I'll go ahead of you to Galilee." And so Peter is here, knowing what he has done and knowing the claims he's made. He knows that when he gets to Galilee, he's got to face Jesus again, even though he's made all these claims. He's probably just wishing he'd just reach out, grab that claim, and pull it back in because of what has happened. So he's probably dreading running into Jesus. And let's have a look at the situation where it happens. And we're in John 21, and it's verse 1. And it says, "Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples by the Sea of Galilee." This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there. Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. And Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "We'll come too," they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. Now, Peter clearly is the leader of this bunch, isn't he? He says, "I'm going fishing." They all go, "Yeah, we'll come with you." I mean, they're probably sitting around, there isn't much to do. He's clearly the leader of them, even though only 10 days before this, he's denied Jesus outright. Even though he's done that, he's still the leader of the crew. He's clearly got a bunch of leadership abilities, he's clearly the natural leader. But it's interesting because until now, since Jesus' death, he's been invisible to us in the biblical account. The only time we've heard of Peter was when he's gone to check out the tomb, and of course he doesn't find Jesus in the tomb, it's empty. But all the time when Jesus appears to the disciples, Peter doesn't get a mention. We know he's there with them because it says they were all there. But Peter doesn't say anything that's recorded. He's not mentioned in any of the accounts. He is there, but he isn't mentioned. It's interesting, isn't it? He's the leader of the band, but I suggest to you that what he's doing is he's so ashamed that he's keeping a low profile. He's not speaking up. He's saying he's the grey man at the back of the room now. Even though when not Jesus is in there, of course, he's still the leader, isn't he? "Let's go fishing. Yep, we're going with you." They're all following him. But when Jesus is around, you don't hear of Peter saying anything or doing anything. Now, there's a bit of a bigger question here, which is this. Why are they fishing? Sounds like a pretty reasonable thing to do, doesn't it? They were fishermen originally. Probably remember 3 years earlier, there was Simon, there was Andrew. They had James and John, their mates, and their dad, James and John's dad, right? They were fishermen. They had like a fishing business running between all of them. And of course, that's how they started. So about 3 years before this, they're in the fishing business. So they're at a bit of a loose end now. They've been told to go to Galilee. They've headed to Galilee. There's not much going on there. What are they going to do? So they go back to fishing again, don't they? So they're going to make a bit of a go of fishing. That's what they did 3 years ago. It's interesting because, to be honest, they might have been really good fishermen until they met Jesus, but they were really bad after it. Because the gospel account, the only time they ever catch fish in the gospel account is when Jesus gets them to catch fish. Like, they don't catch anything until he says, "Put the net on the other side, try this, try that," right? They probably were very good fishermen. They probably had a good fishing business. But the bottom line is Jesus, I think, was messing with them. So when he was there, all the fish were swimming around and probably bumping into the nets or whatever, not getting caught, until, of course, Jesus, because he would use it as a way to teach them. So he often used their fishing as the way to teach them a little bit about what their job was. They weren't actually there to catch real fish, of course. They had another job. See, why were they fishing? You see, what should have they been doing? Well, what have they been doing for the last 3 years while they've been in Bible college with Jesus, walking around Galilee? They've been healing the sick, they've been raising the dead, they've been healing lepers, they've been driving out demons, they've been doing preaching the kingdom of God. They've been doing all this stuff. We even know he sent them off on like little sort of sabbaticals to go and do stuff, and he sent them all out on mission, and he did a whole bunch of stuff with them. Jesus is gone now. Have they gone back into that? Have they graduated from Bible college and decided to go preach? No. They're back fishing again. So I think the question here is, why have they gone back fishing? Was it just easier and safer for them to go back to what they knew? Well, let's have a look and see what happens. In John 21, it goes on and from verse 4, and it says, "At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, 'Fellows, have you caught any fish?' 'No,' they replied. Then he said, 'Throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat and you'll get some.' So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it." Well, big old Simon Peter here must have been having a massive deja vu moment. He must have been sitting there going, hang on, I can pretty much remember this exact same thing happening about 3 years before. Here, this is from Luke chapter 5. Check this out. This is right at the beginning when Simon was called. When he finished speaking, that's Jesus, he said to Simon, now go out where it's deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish. Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all night and it didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, I'll let down the nets down again. And this time their nets were so full of fish, they began to tear. So see Simon Peter, who's been silent in the accounts whenever Jesus has been around, he's gone out fishing but really, is that what he should be doing? Well, that's what he's felt he's had to do. And he's had this huge deja vu moment where he's not catching any fish, and then some guy on the bank says to him, hey, throw it down on the other side of the boat, and of course they catch an absolute haul of fish. Now, I'm not a great fisherman. We lived in the Torres Strait for 2 years, and I can tell you, I was pulling fish out of there that were huge. Like, they were massive fish, and I can't fish at all. Like, I've got no clue about fishing. Like, what I would do is I would get fencing wire, because it wouldn't break, and I would put like a big hook on the end, like a nail, and I would jam bait on it that I knew fish would want to eat, and I'd throw it over and I'd tie it off to the side of the boat, and I'd sort of wait. And after a while, I'd pull this exhausted fish in. Like, that's my version of fishing, right? Like, there's whole people out there who can play the fish and they can do it. No, not me. See, I've got no skill at all, and so all I do is just the brute force approach to fishing. So that's all I do, fencing wire, something that can't break, throw it out there, and then scull drag it back into the boat when it's too tired to do anything else, right? That's how I approach fishing. Well, one thing I do know about fishing is that the right side and the left side of the boats is pretty much irrelevant. It's irrelevant to you, because when you throw it in one side, chances are it drifts on the other side, and which was a real problem when you got fencing wire, because it get tangled in the engine, and that's another story. But that was always a bit of an issue. But really, throwing it on the left or the right side of the boat, for a fisherman, it's irrelevant. Like, there aren't too many fishermen going along going, in this particular spot, you've got to drop it on the right side of the boat, because on the left side of the boat, you get nothing. Right? It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen that way. So clearly, when he's done it this time, he's doing it for someone's benefit, isn't he? Jesus is making a statement here. He's making a statement for Peter. Because remember, Peter's been silent. Peter's been the one that let Jesus down. See, Jesus is giving Simon a gentle reminder. Just like the call. See, after that first time, he says to Simon Peter, I'm going to make you fishers of men. That's what he says to him. And now what are they doing? They're back fishing for fish. And so exactly the same thing happens. And Jesus is giving him that gentle reminder that he's called to be a fisher of men, not a fisher of fish. He's made the wrong decision. He's gone to Galilee like he should have. But he's made the wrong decision to start going fishing for fish. What should he be doing? He should have been doing what he'd spent 3 years being taught to do. I think it's pretty awkward for Peter, isn't it? It's very awkward for him. And when he realises that it's Jesus on the shore and that he's being reminded of this whole mission that he has, what's he going to do? What are his options? Well, the first thing, of course, he could do, he could just fade into the background, couldn't he? He could just do the fade thing. So, he could sort of just go to the end of the boat, hide away when he realises what's going on. He could do that. That's a legitimate option. If you're feeling embarrassed, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to sort of shrink up when I had the Governor General on the phone. Actually, what I really wanted to do was slam it down and go, no, it wasn't him. No, I'm not answering. So I wanted to do, but of course, you can do the fade. He didn't do the fade. There's a really good opportunity to do that. What he could have done, of course, is the classic man thing, and that's get busy with the mundane. He could have gone, oh, look, a rope. I'll quickly every man does this, don't they? Like when there's one of those awkward moments at home, like your wife says, do I look good in this dress? It's one of those ones, oh, look, there's a nail I'll have to fix. Or look, she's trying to share her feelings with me. Oh, look at that. There's some painting over here I better quickly do. Like, that's an easy way out for a bloke because, one, you get to do something manual, you don't have to think about it, and you're still contributing. Righto? You're still contributing to the house. That's an easy way. He could have busied himself with the mundane. Oh, he could have called out to Jesus, couldn't he, if he was an extrovert? He could have said, yep, gotcha. Hey, Jesus. Yep. Hey, check that out. It's Jesus. Right? You did this to me last time, Jesus. Good one. You know, he could have called out to him, couldn't he? Acknowledged that he was there. He doesn't do that either. He could have just taken charge. I mean, he's the leader. He could have immediately done the all right. Okay, get the boat going, get the sail up, get the nets up, get the engine running. Probably he would have done that, but it would have been sort of the version of that. And let's go in, pull those things, get those lines in, anchors in, nets, whatever. He could have quickly taken charge. He was the leader. That would have taken a bit of the awkwardness out of it, wouldn't it, if he'd got that? So what does he do? Let's have a look and see what he does. It's in John 21, verse 7. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he'd stripped for work, jumped into the water and headed to shore. See, finally Peter has remembered his calling, hasn't he? He's been given this gentle reminder from Jesus that he's not a fisher of fish. He's a fisher of men. And now the last place he wants to be in the whole world is in a boat fishing for fish. Because he's realised that that's not where he's meant to be. That's not his place in life. His place in life isn't fishing for fish. His place is at being a fisher of men. So he can't wait to get out of that boat. He doesn't bother giving orders. In fact, he puts his shirt on, which is interesting because we would have normally thought you'd take your shirt off to jump in the water, don't you? But he puts his shirt on. That's a cultural thing because you can't walk around, without your shirt on. Back in that culture, that was like would have been a sign of great disrespect if he'd sort of just jumped in without putting his jacket on. So he's put his jacket on as a sign of respect and he's jumped in. See, for the second time in his life, he's leaving his nets. And of course, we know that this is the final one. He left his nets and he's gone for good now. That's what he's doing. He doesn't go back to be a fisherman again. He's going for his calling. See, he's finally decided, he's finally remembered what his calling is, and he's decided that he has to follow it. And so there's only one way to do that. It's not wait for the boat to get back to the shore. He's got to get out of the boat and get there as quickly as possible and get into what he's doing. I think sometimes as Christians we can be more than happy to be the person who stays in the boat, not the guy that jumps out. Sometimes we can be the one when we think maybe we're doing the wrong thing or we're avoiding what we believe God is calling us to do, then maybe we're that guy that sort of just shuffles up the back of the boat and starts coiling the ropes. We come to church and we do stuff at church and maybe we're just, carefully coiling that rope so we don't have to face our real calling. Or maybe we just acknowledge, good one, Jesus, you're calling me, being called, I'm on it, right. But that's it. That's just acknowledging it and we don't actually do anything about it. Or sometimes we do something about it, but we're just going to wait for that boat. Well, there's no hurry. I won't get out of the boat. Still 100 yards to go before it gets to the shore. No point me going off and doing that thing that I feel God's called to. There's still time. I've got to get old yet. I've got to go to Bible college. That'll take at least 17 years if I string it out. Right, that'll delay that. No, not for Peter. I think if people from outside the church were to look at Christians, I'm not sure they would see the sort of person that jumps off the boat and swims into the shore. I think they're much more likely to see the people that are just sitting in the boat waiting for it to come to shore. I mean, look at Christmas. Nowhere are we instructed in the Bible to celebrate Christmas, are we? There's nowhere in the Bible that says go and celebrate Christmas or Easter or any of those festivals. Some of the Jewish festivals, of course, there's some instructions about following those along, but we don't do that, of course, because we're not Jews and we're released from that particular law. But there's nothing in the Bible that tells us to do Christmas. But I suggest if you went out into the community and you asked people in the community what do Christians do, they would say they celebrate festivals. I think that's what most people would say. They celebrate Christmas and they celebrate Easter and they celebrate a Sunday festival by going to church on Sundays. I mean, Christmas is a classic, isn't it? I think Christians are often invisible behind Santa and presents and all those things. Now, clearly, Christ is the most important part of Christmas, isn't it? But where are we in that whole picture? I think we're often invisible. I think we're sitting at the back of the boat. See, the greatest news on the planet is going to be preached openly and can be every Christmas. The carols in the domain, just the carols alone are preaching the gospel. Just those alone. And where are the Christians? Are they the ones leaping out of the boat? I'm not too sure. Why is that? Well, maybe we're a bit like Peter. You see, maybe we've made some rash promises before. Maybe just like him, we've said, yep, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I'm going to commit my life. I'm going to do these things, I'm going to get into it. And then maybe it just hasn't happened. Maybe we've never delivered on it. Or maybe we're a bit like Peter in that we sort of just stay on the lowdown. On those times when Jesus is, he's breathing on the apostles and saying, receive the Holy Spirit. Do we hear about Peter, the leader of the disciples? No. He's somewhere in the back of the room. Maybe we're a bit like Peter and we just stay on the lowdown amongst everyone else. Hope that maybe God doesn't notice. Or maybe like Peter, we just need a gentle little reminder of our mission. Just a gentle little reminder. And then if we get that gentle little reminder, then I suppose we have to then make Peter's decision, don't we? How do we respond when we get that reminder? Our mission, our mission on this planet is to bring his kingdom. And what do we respond? How do we respond to that? Well, I suppose the question is, do we respond like Peter? Do we sit in the boat and wait for everyone else to get ashore? Or do we go? When I became a Christian as a teenager, and I joined the army and I backslid and disappeared away from the faith. Certainly no one who went to the academy with me would have ever have thought that I was a Christian and that I'd lived a Christian life. And then over time, Janet and I, we got married and we came back to the church. And we were at a Baptist church in Sydney. And Pastor Craig Corker was the pastor of that church. It wasn't a big church, probably the size of, maybe half the size of Hills, I suppose. It wasn't a big church. And anyway, we were going pretty regularly. And one day the pastor came to me and we were having a coffee one day. And he just said to me, is this a hobby for you or do you actually believe it? He said, because at the moment what it looks like, it's a Sunday hobby. You do it on the Sunday. I was even going to a Bible study midweek. And he said, but outside of those times, what are you doing? And I had to sort of fun up to that and say, well, to be honest, nothing. It was like the Lions Club. I was just turning up. That's what I was doing. I was doing, Christianity was a hobby for me. He really convicted me. He really convicted me to think about, what does my faith mean? Is my faith something like a hobby? Or does my faith actually drive me to what I do and where I go? And of course, that was the early 90s. That wasn't like yesterday for me. It wasn't like that was my decision to go and become a pastor or any of that sort of stuff at all. But it changed my view and it changed what I did and it changed my approach. It changed everything about how I related to people in the military. It changed everything about how I related to my family. It changed everything about how I engaged with my church. Just that simple question. Really what he's saying is, you're in that boat, the boat's going to shore. Are you just going to travel in it with everyone else, or are you going to be the guy that jumps out of the boat and swims ashore? Is it just a hobby, Mick? Or are you going to get ready for something a little bit more? Well, we're going to pray as a group, as in some small groups. You should all have your prayer sheet. Can we get a couple of those handed around if we haven't got enough prayer sheets? But in addition to that, what I'd like you to do is if you feel that you need prayer because you feel that you've got to jump out of that boat, if that's you, if that's how you feel that you need to respond, if you feel that you've just been coasting, righto, maybe it's been a bit of a hobby and you need some prayer, then what I'm going to do is we're just going to be praying in groups of 2s and 3s. And so it's an opportunity for you to ask for the folk who you're with just to pray for you. And it doesn't have to be awkward, doesn't have to be difficult. All you've got to do is say, hey, can you pray for me to get out of the boat? That's all you've got to say. You don't have to give them the whole story. Just say, can you pray for me to get out of the boat? And then the folk who are with you can just pray that simple prayer. Pray that we'll be courageous enough to jump out of the boat, that we'll be enthusiastic enough to jump out of the boat, that it won't just be a hobby. That's not what our faith is. Our faith isn't the soccer club. It's eternal life. So if we'll just break into couples of groups. I'll close us off once we get there. So we'll just have a few minutes doing that. So if you want to just grab 2s and 3s, however it works. If you're not comfortable with that, that's okay. You're welcome to pray on your own. But I'd really encourage you to jump in with a couple of people and pray together.